Welcome to Political Perspectives. I'm Hugo Gurdon, Editor-In-Chief of the Washington Examiner. We're in a week which people all across the political spectrum have talked about as being crucial to the decision about whether or not President Joe Biden can stay in office, can run for a second term. He's been making moves that show he regards it that way. He started the week with a letter to congressional Democrats. It was defiant. It said that they needed to back him and stop questioning whether or not he was going to run, because he was absolutely going to run. And then he put on something of a sort of electoral grandstanding performance at NATO, giving the Presidential Medal of Freedom to the head of NATO. And I'm joined by Byron, Chief Political Correspondent of the Washington Examiner, to discuss this week and where things are going. Byron, has Joe Biden weathered the storm, or is there still more storm to come?
Well, I think there's two answers to that, and one is short-term and the other is long-term. And I have to say, I think his short-term actions have been pretty brilliant. The goal being to stay on the ticket and not have to withdraw from the race. I really think last weekend, when he went to Philadelphia, was kind of a turning point where he identifies a lot of his survival with the support of Black Democrats, of the Congressional Black Caucus, of Black religious leaders. He goes to a church, and he tries to sort of revive this South Carolina vibe that he had in 2020 when his campaign was dead. And he came to South Carolina, and Representative James Clyburn revived it. And so that really helped his support in the Democratic Party. One, because Black Democrats are a very large and critical part of the Democratic coalition. And two, because I think a lot of other non-Black Democrats didn't really want to be seen as opposing the Congressional Black Caucus and religious leaders. And he also, one more thing, he also reaffirmed his support from a bunch of union leaders. So, I mean, let's say you're a Democratic politician, you want to be on the wrong side of a lot of African-American organizations and the unions too. I mean, not a great idea. Biden really shored up their support. So what I think that did was you saw members of Congress who just 2 days earlier had suggested that Biden would have to go, all of a sudden say, well, he's our nominee and I support him. So in the short term, it was brilliant and it's worked. But he's just he's another senior moment away from having to do all this again. If there's another debate level failure, or if he just has a bunch of sort of Biden-esque senior moments and they pile up, all of that work is undone because people realize that the problem is his physical condition. And it's not going to change.
That's right. It's not a curable disease. It wasn't a bad night. It wasn't a moment. It's his current condition, which can only deteriorate. And one of those who had come out last weekend and said that he needed to stand down was a congressional Democrat, Jerry Nadler. 2 days later, as you say, he was saying, well, he's our nominee. And then he went on to say, and we have to back him. This was hardly a ringing endorsement. And there are, as you say, the chances are very high that there will be another senior moment. And the next one that people are looking to is on Thursday, he has to do a press conference at NATO. And that people will be asking him questions, and he'd better not freeze, otherwise it will open up the same questions. Now, neither Jerry Nadler's comment there, nor, for example, Nancy Pelosi, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, just on MSNBC on Wednesday, saying Joe Biden has to make that decision.
Beloved, he is respected, and people want him to make that decision.
He has said he has made the decision. He has said firmly this week he is going to run. Do you want him to run?
I want him to do whatever he decides to do.
They're closing ranks behind Joe Biden, but they're not slamming the door on having another nominee. Joe Biden can't be said to need to make that decision. He's already indicated what his decision is, but Nancy Pelosi is saying things which say that the party hasn't necessarily accepted that in the long term.
And that's because of what I just said, because they all know it could just happen again. I mean, and it's likely to happen again. I've become kind of a broken record on pointing to the Juneteenth episode on June 10th at the White House, where there's a concert and Biden just freezes up for a couple of minutes. And believe me, if you and I just stopped talking for 2 minutes straight, it would just seem like an eternity. So that was a big deal. And that was June 10th. That was, 17 days before the debate. So it's going to happen again. So all of these Democratic leaders, I think, under the pressures of the moment, are sticking with Biden, but they realize that something could happen. And if something happens, that means Kamala Harris.
Exactly. And that is, I think, the key thing. It seems to me absolutely implausible that the Democrats, in rallying round Biden, have suddenly decided or have realized that he is fit to perform all the duties of president over the course of the next 4 years. They know, or almost all of them know, as well as anybody else, that he's absolutely unfit to be in the office with all its stresses and strains and decision making for the next 4 years. At the same time, they are backing him. So there seems to me an absolutely unavoidable conclusion, and that is they are thinking, if we can just shove him across the election finish line, if we can just let him help him to win, then we have the incumbent. And what they are really doing here is preparing for the inauguration of President Kamala Harris. If it is the case, as I think it absolutely undeniably is, that he cannot lead the country for 4 years, and if it is the case that the Democrats are pushing him across the finish line, what they're thinking is he doesn't serve out his second term, and then President Kamala Harris can take office without ever having to face the public.
Yes, listen, I think the corollary to what I was saying before about shoring up Black support is that, let's say you really, really, truly want Kamala Harris to become president of the United States. What is the most likely way, your best chance for making that happen? Well, I think the best chance for making it happen would be for Joe Biden to be renominated and to be reelected. Because as you were just saying, I don't think there's a snowball's chance that he'll be able to serve all 4 years, which would lead to President Harris. And if for some reason he should falter any time earlier than that, it would still lead to her because she is the Vice President of the United States. So if you want to see the first Black woman president of the United States, she is it right now. And so I think you saw a lot of Democrats kind of make their peace with Harris. They know she's not very popular. They know she hasn't been very impressive in any aspect of the duties of vice president. But they're thinking, this is our best chance.
Yeah, Byron, does the idea of getting President Harris into through kind of these nefarious means or without actually facing the electorate with her as the candidate, doesn't that fit in with some of the ways increasingly that the Democratic Party operates, which is to say they don't trust the people for Republican self-government. They want more and more decisions to be taken in Washington by a kind of oligarchy and a party elite. They want to take decision-making away from the people and who they think are better to govern the country. So the idea of heading towards the inauguration of President Harris, sometime in the next year or two, sort of fits with the way that they run the government, not leaving it to the basket of deplorables out there in the country, don't you think?
Well, I think the thing that supports what you just said is that this is something we know is really likely to happen. I mean, you don't elect a president thinking he's going to die or be disabled sometime before his term is over. You do think of a vice president as a possible successor, so that when the president has served his 2 terms, then the vice president can run on his or her own ticket. But you don't really plan it going in. And that's I think what you're getting at is there's something, it's not sneaky because it's actually happening out in public. We know who the ticket is, but it does actually, if it worked, it would sort of sidestep an actual referendum, a presidential election, right, on this person, Kamala Harris, to be president of the United States.
Yeah, and it's an extraordinary situation that we find ourselves in. We'll leave it there for this week, Byron, and come back and see where we are. We have to watch for the next meltdown, as you say, and that could come as early as Thursday's press conference in NATO.
It could.
They'll come again and again and again. Thanks very much for joining me, and thank you all for joining us on Political Perspectives.